The movie begins with a fight happening in an underground place. There's a guy named Carter Ford who's really good at fighting. A lady named Frankie who owns a bar is watching him closely. Carter wins his fight, and then another guy named Elwood Dalton enters the ring. Carter knows him and decides not to fight, so Dalton still gets paid without a fight. Later, outside the place, someone stabs Dalton because he lost $500 from the fight. But Dalton doesn't seem to be hurt much, so the person who stabbed him runs away. Frankie comes up to Dalton while he's taking care of his wound. She tells him about her bar, the Roadhouse, in a place called Glass Key in Florida. She offers Dalton a job as a bouncer there. At first, Dalton isn't interested, but since he doesn't have many other options, he eventually agrees to work for her. Dalton comes to Glass Key and meets a teenager named Charlie and her dad Steven. They give him a book for free and tell him where to find the Roadhouse. When he gets there, he meets Billy and Laura, who work there, before starting his job. At night, Dalton sees Billy and other guys dealing with troublemakers. Then a biker gang led by Del shows up and starts causing problems for everyone. Dalton tries to talk to Del calmly, but Del just gets on his nerves. Dalton goes outside and challenges Del. Del threatens him, but Dalton fights back and knocks down all the bikers. Then Dalton takes them to the hospital himself. On his way out, a doctor named Ellie scolds him for bringing them there because they're taking up space for other patients. But Dalton charms her, and she helps him with his wounds. Dalton spends the night sleeping in a boat on the lake, even though Frankie tells him there's a crocodile around. While he's sleeping, Dalton has a dream about his final fight in the UFC. Meanwhile, Del and his gang go to a yacht owned by a crime boss named Ben Brandt, who they work for. They tell Brandt about Dalton and how he beat them up. Brandt tells them to deal with Dalton however they can because he sees Dalton as a danger to his business in town. Locals quickly recognize Dalton, and troublemakers back off when they see him around. He teaches Billy and the others how to deal with difficult customers at the bar. Dalton notices one guy hiding a knife and takes it away before kicking him out. One night, after work, Dalton walks home, but Del and his gang try to hit him. They manage to knock Dalton off a bridge, but he survives. When he reaches home, Del is waiting for him with a gun. Dalton fights Del again and pushes him into the water. Even though Dalton tries to rescue Del, a crocodile gets to him first and eats him. Later, Dalton finds out about some illegal activities happening in town from Charlie. As he leaves the bookstore, two of Brandt's men try to make him go with them, but he breaks the fingers of the guy holding a gun on him. Brandt realizes that Dalton is not an easy opponent, and even Brandt's imprisoned father Gerald becomes aware of this. Gerald contacts Knox, his toughest and meanest henchman, to come to Glass Key and deal with Dalton. Knox arrives at Brandt's place and informs him that his father hired him, which doesn't sit well with Brandt or his other criminal friends. Dalton goes on a date with Ellie, who takes her ex's boat out onto the water. She confesses that she knows about Dalton's past, something he's been trying to keep hidden. Even though Dalton tries to leave, Ellie persuades him to stay, and they share a kiss. Later, Dalton is confronted by Sheriff Big Dick and his corrupt deputies. The sheriff orders Dalton to leave town, but Dalton refuses. The deputies start attacking Dalton, with the sheriff preparing to kill him until Ellie arrives and slaps him. She takes Dalton away and reveals that the sheriff is her father and is working with Brandt. Ellie then urges Dalton to leave town sincerely. That night at the Roadhouse, Brandt arrives and goes up to Dalton. He starts mocking Dalton about his time in the UFC. It's revealed that Dalton left the UFC because he accidentally killed his opponent in the ring even after the fight was stopped by the referee, and Dalton has been haunted by this ever since. After Brandt leaves, Knox shows up to cause trouble. He attacks Billy and the others, forcing Dalton to intervene. Knox proves to be a tough opponent for Dalton, but Dalton surprises Knox by getting back up after taking a beating. Ellie shows up to help and provide medical care. As Dalton prepares to leave town, he notices the bookstore on fire, set by Brandt's henchmen Sam and Vince. Dalton learns that Charlie and Steven are at the hospital but are safe. He encounters Vince, who threatens him with a gun, but Dalton incapacitates him by hitting his throat, causing his windpipe to collapse, leading to suffocation. While getting rid of Vince's body, Dalton encounters Mo, a member of Del's gang who is relatively less bad than the others. Mo informs Dalton about a meeting planned by Brandt and his gang early the next day. Dalton goes to the waterfront and finds one of Dick's corrupt deputies loading a large case of money onto a boat. He knocks out the deputy and places Vince's body with him to frame the deputy for Vince's death. The sheriff finds Dalton and tells him that Brandt has kidnapped Ellie. Dalton rushes to Brandt's yacht and sees Dick there, realizing that Dick intentionally led him onto the boat. However, Brandt confesses that he did indeed kidnap Ellie. Before the henchman can attack him, Dalton detonates the boat he arrived on, which belonged to Ellie's ex, to create confusion. The yacht begins to sink, and Dalton defeats the henchman before locating Ellie. She breaks through a window, and they both escape. Knox arrives in a small boat and tries to kill Dalton while Brandt takes Ellie onto a motorboat. Dalton boards the motorboat, and Knox falls into the water. Dalton fights Brandt, causing the motorboat to crash near the roadhouse, throwing Brandt onto the roof. Meanwhile, Knox climbs out of the water, steals a truck, and crashes it into the roadhouse. When Brandt orders Knox to kill Dalton, Knox has had enough of Brandt's orders and breaks his neck. Dalton and Knox then engage in another fight, with Knox proving tough once again. However, Dalton gains the upper hand and defeats Knox by stabbing him with wooden shards until he is incapacitated. Dick arrives and offers to help Dalton as a thank you for rescuing Ellie. Ellie and Dalton exchange a final glance before he departs. Frankie, Billy, Laura, and the rest of the crew begin cleaning up the mess at the roadhouse while still keeping it open for business. Dalton visits the bookstore to see Charlie and Stephen one last time. He bids them farewell and leaves them with the bag of money he took from the deputy. Dalton then boards a bus to his next destination. During the credits, Knox is shown to have survived the fight. He overpowers the Dr. S and leaves the hospital wearing only a gown.